Welcome to this live stream for Empty Cloud Monastery. I'd like to begin as usual by paying homage to our teacher, the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Munchapure munchapachato Marje munchapawa saparaku Sabata vimutamanaso Napurnam jati jaram upehisi. So welcome everyone to this Dhamma session for Empty Cloud Monastery. And the topic of the session today is the topic of time, the concept of time in the Buddha's teachings. And indeed, time is a concept in the teachings of the Buddha. Time is a perception, and it's a very compelling one for us. The sense of past and future and present. And it comes about perhaps through the reality of anicca, of constant change. So as things are constantly changing, we can look back on what has been and we can extrapolate into the future. And these are all vast fields, actually, of suffering for us and confusion and chaos. And so the Buddha's teachings are very particular, one could say, as to how we relate to time, the concept of time, and how we practice with it. There's also, that in the Buddhist cosmology, there is the deep time, the sense of the enormity of the universe of space and the universe of time that we find ourselves inhabiting. And so I'd like to touch a little bit on that. But first of all, the verse that I chanted just now is a verse from the Dhammapada. I put in the suggested reading at a few wonderful teachings around this topic. And this is one of them, Dhammapada, verse 348. Muncha pure, muncha pachato. Muncha, let go, release, come out of. Pure, the past, come out of the past, let go of the past. Muncha pachato, let go of the future. Majje muncha, also let go of the present. Let go of what is between the past and the future, what's in the middle. That is also to be let go of. Majje muncha. Bhawasa paragu. In this way we go beyond birth and death, beyond rebirth. Sabata vimuttamanaso, with your heart then freed in every respect, the mind, the heart, vimutti, freed in this way, through not clinging to the past, the future, or the present. Napunan jati jarang upehisi, you will not come again. Rebirth cannot then continue to happen for that heart and mind. So such a beautiful, pithy, profound teaching. The Dhammapada, the most popular excerpt from the early Buddhist teachings, little books, Dhammapada verses, and there are verses like this to be found in the Dhammapada. So profound, so all-encompassing for us, for the practice. So there it is, friends, not to hold on to the past, present, or future. That is not to make much of time, to let go of time, to let go of that concept. And very famously, the Buddha gave 4 teachings, or rather in the Majjhima Nikaya, there are 4 suttas side by side, 131, 2, 3, and 4. And these 4 suttas are all on this same teaching. Some famous verses the Buddha gave on this topic to guide us in our practice, the Bhaddikarata Suttas. So we'll look at those now, and they are the same teaching, as I say, that comes 4 times. In the first Bhaddikarata Sutta, Bhadde means a blessed, karata, one eka rata, one night. Or possibly there's a connotation here of one attachment, one thing that's worth holding on to. But more properly, this is generally translated as one blessed or one excellent night. The exposition, the teaching on one excellent night. But if you were a Pali speaker, you may have the added connotation of one excellent attachment. Very, very similar words, very different meaning perhaps, but we can contemplate these 2 possibilities. So these suttas, one excellent night, one excellent attachment, the 4 of them, the first one's given by the Buddha, and we'll look at this sutta. The second one is a reiteration of the same teaching given by Ananda and praised subsequently by the Buddha. And the third and fourth versions of the Bhaddikarata Sutta, the same teaching, are both instances of a deity visiting a monk, 2 different monks, 2 different deities. And on both occasions, the deity was giving this teaching, Bhaddikarata Sutta, to a monk to help him to practice skillfully. So in both those cases, the monks went to see the Buddha. One of them, Samidhi, in the 133, Majjhima 133, he was living near the Buddha and went straight away to report to the Buddha about this heavenly visitation and teaching. And in the 134, Majjhima 134, the monk was far from the Buddha, so he got himself on the road and he walked to where the Buddha was, a considerable distance, and reported this visitation to the Buddha. And in the process of doing that, these 2 monks, of course, remembered the teaching, were presumably practicing the teaching, and could recount the teaching to the Buddha. And on both occasions, the Buddha was delighted, or rather, he praised them and praised the deities who had given them this teaching. So this Bhaddikarata teaching, these verses were widely spoken about at the time of the Buddha, not only amongst human beings, but also amongst the gods. Indeed, the Buddha is said to have given this teaching to the gods on many occasions. So why don't we look at the teaching? These verses, pithy, short verses, short and to the point. And I'm going to read from Bhante Sujato's translation. This is what the Buddha said. Don't run back to the past, or don't revive the past. Don't run ahead to the future. Don't anticipate the future. What's past is left behind. It's finished. The future has not arrived. And any present phenomenon you clearly discern. In every case, the unfaltering, the unshakable. Having known that, foster it. Today is the day to practice ardently, keenly. Who knows? Tomorrow may bring death. There's no bargain to be struck with death and its mighty horde. One who keenly meditates like this, tireless, all night and all day, this is a person who has a fine night. So declares the peaceful sage. So here the Buddha is actually pointing to the present moment awareness. And what is that? Even the present moment is so elusive for us. But to be here, to be now, to be present, so many spiritual teachers, of course, emphasize this as a really important doorway to practice, to mindfulness, to path. And so in these verses, the Buddha's saying, you cannot revive the past. It's dead already. It's over, it's gone. And so not to dwell in the past, and also not to create the future, which will never be here. To put the mind and heart ahead of this moment in some way is always an imagination, a creation. And it's often, isn't it, fraught with worry or stress or craving, desire. And the sense of self comes into both past and present. When the mind veers out of the moment, away from here, away from now, then there's almost inevitably a tinge of my past and my future. And so all of this is you could say, two fields or one vast field of suffering for us. And so here the exhortation from the Buddha, so clear, so strong, stay present, just this experience. And when we can be present for what's happening now, invincibly, unshakably, indeed we are invincible and unshakable, because Mara doesn't get a look in. There's no possibility of distraction when we really hone our attention, focus our attention to this present moment. And so this is the advice here. And one could say it's very simple, but it's a life work, isn't it, friends? To come to the meditation, first of all, in our meditation practice, can I be present for just this? It can seem, the present moment, what's happening right now, can seem very boring if we're not training ourselves to open to the fullness and richness of all that is, all that is. All is in this present moment. If we're not opening to this reality, then we're going to shy away very quickly to something more interesting, generally something in the past or something in the future, some desire, some fear, some agitation. And I had the experience myself on a retreat once of developing quite good samadhi, so I was quite focused and present, and I noticed the occasions when the mind would move into the past or lean into the future. And my experience of those moments was of suffering, great suffering, like something dangerous, something to be avoided, something to really drop, because we lose the ability to be here, to be present when the mind is distracted in these ways. And it's actually like a hot suffering, like a hellish suffering, like an agitation for the mind. And yet, this is so much what we're used to doing and how we're used to dwelling mentally and emotionally, And so we really initially often find that the letting go of past and future is difficult because the present seems so bleak and empty. There's just this body, and it might be aching, it might be sore, there's just this breath, nothing much happening. And yet, as many of us know, as you stay steady, stay present for whatever arises, moment by moment, one could say, for whatever's present here and now, then slowly but surely the awareness broadens and there is great interest. There's a great fascination. There's a enlightenment factor comes in of investigation of Dharma. We want to dive into the truth. We want to be here for this reality. And it truly, as we develop our practice in this way, the present moment, we could call it, this presence, becomes everything. And we recognize that past and future are genuinely unreal and collapse into this. There's nowhere else to be. This is the only place where we can be present, where we can be mindful, where insight can be developed, wisdom can be developed, path can be developed. It's the only way, one could say, to Nibbana, is to invincibly, unshakably anchor ourselves in this present moment awareness. And words are difficult. Let's consider how time is a concept, how the sense of moment, present, past, and future are all conceptual for us. And it's interesting just to explore that, just to consider that these are creations of the mind. And there is actually really no such thing as time, ultimately, because there's only this. This is it. And to open to this is helpful for us to enable us to be more conscious of this inclination, this tendency of the mind to create past, to create future. We may think the past is memories that are accurate and valid, but as we know, of course, memory is a very tricky thing, very slippery, very untrue most often. And we know this, and you know, the police will be aware of this. Anyone who wants to find out what happened to us, what we saw, what we heard, what we witnessed in the past, can be very aware that whatever we remember will often be, there'll be a great deal of fabrication there, because the mind has the ability to sort of fill in the gaps, to try to give us a seamless sense of self. The consciousness is very clever at sort of plugging the gaps. And our job, friends, is to unplug the gaps and to notice that these ways of thinking, of distracting and proliferating mentally are indeed very flimsy, very shaky fabrications. Not to believe in them, not to believe in our memories, not to believe that we are actually recalling something that happened. No, let's not dwell on recollections, and let's not believe them when they arise for us, you know. And I'm not saying to dismiss, you know, everything we know and we've learned and we've experienced, but just to have that sense of recognition that it's all very shaky and not a place, not a way to spend our time. I have elderly parents I live with, and they naturally, in old age, the mind tends to go back into the past because there's so much there, perhaps, and the present is not so easy, perhaps, you know. There's more suffering, physical suffering, and not a lot to, one could say, look forward to. So death is imminent, and there's not a lot more adventures to be had. There's not a lot more one can proliferate around the bucket list, the plans, the enticing delights that may lie ahead for us. And so the mind quite naturally inclines, more into the past. And one can remember many things. And in a way, I feel that this is almost like a very natural happening. And people who look after elders often encourage them to reminisce, to reflect on the past. But we can do this in a skillful way. If the mind goes into the past, always to have the element of doubt about what's being recalled, to open to that possibility that it's not a sure thing, and also to use whatever feelings arise in the present, whatever understanding arises in the present, to gain wisdom, to gain insight. Let it be for that. Putting things to rest, tying up loose ends, making amends. These are things we can do when we skillfully deal with past recollections that arise for us in the mind, but not to hold on to any of it. Be willing to do, as it says in this beautiful Dhammapada verse, to let go of the past. And don't, as in Bhaddikaratta Sutta also, don't lean into the future, because we're losing ourselves when we do this. When we're able, friends, to be present, step back from anything other than now, here, this present experience, then we actually get much more of a sense of the fullness, the bigger picture. The past and future can kind of expand for us into a much less personal and much less distracting field. So we can see the bigger picture. And when we see a fuller, wider, with a fuller and wider lens, then we're able to more fully let go of the sense of involvement, one could say, in that picture, in the field of experience. In the Bhaddikaratta Sutta, one of the versions, Mahakachana is asked to give a fuller explanation of these verses. I think it's 133, Majjhima 133. He is invited by the monks after the Buddha has given them this teaching. He's invited to explain further. Can you tell us the meaning? Can you give us a broader teaching on these verses? And in doing so, he points to relating to past and future in terms of the six senses. So when we remember something in the past, what we're really remembering is going to be, isn't it, seeing sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touches, and thoughts, mental recollections. This is how we experience the past when it comes up in the mind. And the same for the future. When we look ahead and create and dwell in imagined futures, we're actually creating and dwelling in sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touches, and thoughts, ideas. And this we can consider. And in all of this, there is a sense very often of personhood. So when the past comes up, it's me in the past, what I did, what I experienced, what happened to me. And when I put the mind into the future, or when the future comes up, when, say, a worry or a concern about the future arises, it's the future in terms of my future, what's going to happen to me, or mine. What am I going to see, hear, smell, taste, touch, or think? And so to consider the movement away from presence, pure presence, is also a movement away from anatta, from the not self, the truth of the way things are, into selfing, into creating a person who exists through time. Here is the realm of birth and death. You know, I got born at such and such a time. I'm heading inexorably towards death, and that will be the end, or maybe something comes after that. Either way, it's not exactly a pleasant or enticing prospect. In the meantime, I might distract myself with all sorts of pleasant possibilities before that death comes. But even those pleasant possibilities will, in the end, fade away, and that is suffering too. So we move away from presence into past and future, and that movement is also a movement into self, me and mine. And so in this version of the Bhattacharya Sutta Majjhima, I think 133, we're given this fuller teaching how to avoid not only creating oneself and therefore suffering in the past and in the future, but also considering the present moment. To be dwelling invincibly and unshakably in this presence is to have no sense of continuity, of personhood, no desire, no attachment. If we start to notice that we are somehow bringing ourselves into the present moment experience, if we're aware of the arising of desire or aversion in this present moment experience, this is not to dwell invincibly or unshakably. So these delusions are to be noticed, you know. What we recognize when there's simply presence is anicca, anatta, dukkha. This is the way it is. Things are constantly changing. There's a flow of experience. There's nothing personal about it. There is only seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thoughts coming and going. There is no push or pull. How can there be when we're observing constant change? And we can see that within that experience of presence, there is the possibility of suffering whenever desire or aversion arise in the mind. So we have in our presence, in our present moment awareness, in this mindfulness that we're cultivating, the lens that can see when suffering arises through liking, disliking, through a sense of self. And all of this is to be discerned and can only be discerned when we're present, when we're here and now. So we don't just have the exhortation in Bhattacharya Sutta to step away from the tendency to dwell on the past or project into the future, but also in this present moment experience, we could call it, we have the strong encouragement to be invincible here, to be unshakable here, to be aware of the way things are, anicca, anatta, dukkha, and not to veer away into desire, aversion, or selfing. And actually, as soon as we do, as soon as we start to veer away, if we can notice that, we can also notice that inevitably that takes us out of this presence into past and future. So there's a whole kind of constellation of suffering, and we can see that all these things come together, past and future. We're coming into time, and when we come into time, we start to suffer, and we start to fall for the sense of self. We start to like and dislike. Ignorance has arisen. If we can nip all of that in the bud, you know, unshakably be here, witnessing, change, not self, unsatisfactoriness, dukkha. We can catch the dukkha as it arises. So I'd like to speak a little bit about the Buddhist cosmology and how we can relate to that for liberation. The Buddha described in a number of teachings deep time, how it is that there's a when we move the mind heart into time and space, it is infinite. There are infinite possibilities, infinite ways in which we can get caught up. There's no end to the suffering there. There's no end to samsara, to birth and death. So when we enter into time and space, we're entering into samsara, we're entering into suffering, and our work is to withdraw from that and dwell in presence and to give a sense of deep time. In the Buddha's teachings, he speaks about a mountain. Here in Samyutta 15.5, I think it is, 15.5, the Buddha gives us a simile for time. An eon is long, he says. It's not easy to calculate how many years, how many hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of years it lasts. What is an eon? Can the Buddha give a simile? He was asked to give a simile, and he said, yes, I can. Imagine there's a huge mountain, a league long, a league wide, and a league high, a yojana. It's quite a large distance. Imagine a huge mountain. There are no cracks or holes in this mountain. It is one solid mass. And as each century passes, if a person were to stroke the mountain once with a fine piece of cloth, by this means the huge stone mountain would be worn away before an eon had passed. And he goes on to say, that is how long an eon is. And we have transmigrated through many such eons, many hundreds, many thousands, many hundreds of thousands of such eons. Transmigration has no known beginning and no end. That is quite enough for you to become disillusioned, dispassionate, and free regarding all conditions. So this is just one example, one simile to give the sense of deep time, the fullness of this place, this field of time. When we enter this field, there is no end. Therefore, comparing or recognizing the way in which time, space, birth and rebirth, the cycles of samsara are related, recognizing Bhaddikarata Sutta teaching that the place where we can find a handle on all of this, the place where we can find freedom from all of this is in presence, is to step away from time, is to let it all collapse into this moment. Past and present don't actually exist. Time doesn't actually exist for us when we're present. And the fullness and the wholeness of that experience, this presence, is something we want to become very familiar with. And as we make this our standpoint and our place, then we can view time with a dispassionate eye. We can view space dispassionately. We can see all of our past experience, future experience, all that is, all that was, all that will be, all of it can be put aside. We don't have to identify with any of that. We don't want to attach to any of that. We want to be free. So this doorway, this opening, to be invincibly, to be unshakably present. And as I said, I touched on earlier, when we're able to firmly stand, make a stand, anchor ourselves in this presence, then there's an ability to really open to the vastness of the totality of the bigger picture. I'd like to share with you a sutta called 1,000 Eons, and it's from Samyutta 52:11. And this is a sutta where Anuruddha, one of the Buddha's great disciples, was staying at Savatthi, and he's being asked about his practice. And he's asked, what things has the Venerable Anuruddha developed and cultivated to attain great direct knowledge? And he says, I attained great direct knowledge through cultivating the 4 kinds of mindfulness practice. Mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feeling, mindfulness of mind states, and mindfulness of Dhamma, mindfulness of concepts, of thinking. He did this keen, aware, rid of covetousness and rid of displeasure for the world. So stepping back from it all. And it's because of developing and cultivating these 4 kinds of mindfulness meditation that I can recollect 1,000 eons. So we've just heard, friends, what an eon is, how incalculably impossible to measure such a vast depth of time it is. And here Anuruddha's telling us that through practicing 4 Satipatthanas, he was able to recollect 1,000 eons. So there's something to consider here, which is that the more we can relinquish, let go of, our very small but significant tethering to the sense of this time, this place, this person, my past, my future, my present, as much as we can let go through cultivating mindfulness, through presence, as much as we can let go of our small world, so much we can open to the fullness of reality. And those who have let go completely of all the attachment to self, attachment to suffering, are able to transcend time and space, so that indeed, all that is, all that has been, all that will be, the fullness of all that we can comprehend in this universe, all that we can experience in time, can be known to such a person. And so the recollection of past is very clear and very full. The awareness of future is also very clear and very full, only when we're not invested any longer in the concept of time. And we can appreciate from these teachings that time is a concept, time is to be let go of. And when we, practically speaking, when we find ourselves dwelling in the past or dwelling in the future, let's be very quick to notice and to come back, to bring ourselves back, to not allow ourselves to get distracted, to give ourselves the gift of presence. And as we cultivate and practice in our meditation, we bring this into our everyday life. And can we be present for our lives? When we get to be present for our lives, we let go of so much stress, anxiety, agitation, imagination, proliferation, so much suffering. Life can become very smooth and easeful when we're here for it, when we're present. So this is an encouragement for all of us to develop this quality of presence. Consider Bhaddikarata Sutta, this beautiful teaching from the Buddha. I'd like to conclude by reading Bhaddikarata Sutta again. Let's just sit quietly, present, aware of the body, aware of feeling, relaxing thereby, aware of the state of mind, how it is. And in presence, we can open our hearts to this teaching. Don't revive the past. Don't anticipate the future. What's past is over, and the future will not arrive. In every present experience, be present for that experience, unfaltering, unshakably. Know what is happening now. Dwell here. Today is the day. Now is the time to practice. Who knows? We could be dead tomorrow. We cannot do anything to avoid death. And it's on the way for us. So keenly meditate now, tirelessly, by day, by night. Such a person, when we do this, our time is well spent. So declares the peaceful sage. Ewan. Thank you, friends, for your patient listening. And it's a huge topic, the topic of time. I've really just touched upon it in a limited way, and I would really encourage you to just note the suggested reading that I put in the chat and contemplate these teachings and consider the understanding in Buddhism of the kind of cosmology, how the universe has come about, the great expansion of a universe coming into being, and the contraction, and the time concept of how long such a process takes, and to consider then our place in that. It's like looking up at the skies and considering our little space, to consider the vastness of time, the eons and eons of time, and to then come back to the sense of the small time that we know, is to help us to let go of attachment to our small worlds, our past and our future, and to just relinquish, drop all of that and open to the bigger picture. So the Buddhist cosmology is very helpful to consider, but then most particularly the teachings on how to practice, how to direct the mind, where to put our energy, where to put our attention, and where not. So please have a look at the suggested reading. Thanks for all your greetings, everyone. Madeline says, one of my little friends told me this is the very teaching the master gave to Kung Fu Panda. Sadhu. That's wonderful, isn't it? The teachings come up in so many amazing ways. The Dharma is always here for us. And everywhere we look, when we look with presence, with awareness, the world is teaching the Dharma. I was talking yesterday, I had a cousin come to visit and we were talking about nature. Well, first of all, we were talking about the state of the world. And of course, that led to quite a, how to say, charged conversation, a lot of energy, a lot of emotion for us, a lot of confusion and anxiety, one could say. We look at the state of the world, what we know of the state of the world through the media, through the various inputs. And then we found ourselves reflecting on how much of a solace nature is and how good it is to keep connecting with nature, to be out in nature, to learn from nature, to relax into nature, into the world around us, the reality, our feet on the ground, to be in our bodies. And this feels so much more the reality. This feels so much more the place to rest our attention. And the Buddha's teaching, of course, is that there's nothing we can adhere to in this world, nothing we want to believe in other than what we can experience here and now for ourselves. So let's just keep coming back to this again and again. This is the place. This is the doorway to Nibbana, to freedom, freedom from all suffering. Okay. I'm not quite sure. I'm going to see whether I can figure this. Oh, I just answered the question. Okay, thanks, Rebecca. Rebecca had a question and it sort of got resolved in the course of the conversation. That is good. So, friends, I'm not seeing any questions, so we can spend the rest of our time referring to these teachings, perhaps, and consider how we can let go of concepts and how we can open our hearts to the unknowable, the beyond concept, the fullness of reality in presence. May we all keep cultivating presence. Let's finish by paying homage to our teacher, the Buddha, with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, 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 anumodami.